You know what the plural is for a group of dudes?
No.
An epic.
Okay.
Murder of crows, flock of geese, epic of dudes.
Okay, that's good to know.
It was only a matter of time before I found my way back to Bellingham, but Bellingham has a lot of trails, and choosing the right trails to ride up here can be tricky. I had to make sure my trip up here was worthwhile, so I needed to enlist a local guide who would show me around and, oh, hey, who's this guy? A local guide. Awesome. I can't thank Jeff Kendall-Weed enough for generously offering to show me around Chuckanut, which is a trail system I've wondered about for a while, but I wasn't quite sure how to approach it. There is a company in Bellingham called Intrinsic Flow, and they do offer shuttles for this trail system, but I'm a glutton for punishment, so I wanted the full pedaling tour of this system, and Jeff provided that with a 16.5-mile ride that included 3,500 feet of elevation gain on a ride that never exceeded 1,800 feet in elevation, which should deftly illustrate the challenge facing anyone who chooses to tackle these trails without mechanized assistance. There are many different ways to approach Chuckanut, but for this ride, we started at the Arroyo Park trailhead and headed up the Arroyo Canyon from California Connector before connecting with a Lost Lake Trail off the Interurban Trail. I'm going to do my best to call out the names of trails on this route, but I'm also attaching a link to my exact GPS track in this video for reference. There aren't that many trail intersections, but if you make a wrong turn on this loop, you'll kind of end up paying for it. The first few trails we rode on this route ended up being just your standard dog walking trails, which totally makes sense considering how close this park is to Bellingham. Even though these first trails are more accurately characterized as trodes, since they practically, if not literally, have a macadam surface in many cases, they're still pretty steep. We gained over 1,000 feet in the first 2 miles of this route. So the trail signs you'll see on Chuckanut, especially down here where the wide trails and the dog walkers reside, don't always have the same names as what you'll see on trail forks, and that's because, as is common with a lot of other trail systems, the mountain bikers are operating from a different set of names than either the land managers, the hikers, or both. The sign on this trail said Hemlock Trail, but this trail you saw me turn right on is actually the Lost Lake Trail, which looks and rides an awful lot like an old road grade. It's certainly plenty steep. I think I already said you should look for hikers down here, and I do mean that. There are still lots of hikers down here. Be respectful. Make them like mountain bikers, or at least make it really awkward for them to hate us. After a lot of grunting up this road/trail thing, you'll see this intersection. This is where the Salah Trail meets the Lost Lake Trail. Turn left on the Salah Trail. The Salah is a magical experience when you finally get to it because it's actually single track. Good old uphill single track. This is a pretty standard piece of Pacific Northwest single track with some route wads, punchy climbs, and overall techiness. This is a most welcome departure from climbing up the gravel, but it does require you to ride with some coordination and skill. The Salah Trail isn't all uphill, by the way. There is a little downhill tech, and when you get to this intersection right here, you're going to want to turn right, not left, unless, of course, you want to just chicken out and ride back to the car right now. I really liked this trail as it was full of techy challenge, and even the downhills felt like uphills a little bit, and it kept me awake and on my toes the whole time. When you get to this intersection with the Madrone Crest Trail, turn left. Then the trail bombs down the hill for a little bit before approaching the most non-trivial climb of this whole ride. Seriously, this hill is super steep. I'll confess, I was kind of suffering a little bit on this hill. I actually had to stop for a little bit to catch my breath. Of course, I'd eaten Five Guys the night before, woken up with wicked heartburn at 4 in the morning, and was having trouble keeping food down, so I was doing this whole ride on like half an egg McMuffin that I was able to force down that morning, so, I guess I was doing okay considering. The Salah Trail winds through the woods up here on soil that looks more like Canada than it does like Oregon, if that distinction makes sense, with more roots on the surface and just a certain wet sponginess I don't see down where I live before it becomes the Huckleberry Trail, which meets up with the Raptor Ridge Trail at this intersection where you need to go left because it leads to a viewpoint, which is important because it's a viewpoint. You have to go stand on the viewpoint and look at the view. This isn't the most impressive viewpoint that ever existed, and disappointingly there were no raptors on it the day we rode it, but it's still really important because if you follow this route, this trail will lead you all the way around to the other side of this little canyon or valley that you're standing over. So that's pretty cool. Bellingham is north of the volcanic lava flows that compose most of the surface rocks in Oregon and southwest Washington up to about the Snoqualmie Pass, where it changes over to the granite that you kind of, in this case, sandstone that we found ourselves standing on right here. Washington, especially northern Washington, it's geologically interesting. This descent here down Raptor Ridge Trail turned into a nice 10-minute descent. This is no flow trail though. This is pure tech with lots of rocks and roots in the well-drained tread. This sheds water very quickly. This was really cool because I definitely had to earn everything I was able to clear on the trip down this section of trail. I was listening to myself while reviewing the video for this ride and I kept saying, "This is cool," to myself while riding it. So I think I was probably having a pretty good time. But if your preferred riding style is just to point it and pin it, you're not going to like this trail. I like a little oatmeal in my cookies, so this was my kind of fun. But you do have to be on your toes for this. There are a lot of features and obstacles that can't be cleared without keeping your speed up. This isn't like super fast, it's tech. This is the kind of riding I call half-shell playground because even though you're riding some gnarly stuff, there's just so much energy getting pushed into your pedals, even on the descents, that you never really have a chance to put the chin bar on your helmet. Eventually, the Raptor Ridge Trail intersects here with the Lost Lake Trail where we're going to take a left. These women we encountered were trail runners. Trail runners are good-natured, jolly, and downright insane. The day we rode this in early April, the Lost Lake Trail was definitely a bit of a mud pit. It's a relatively flat trail by Bellingham standards, but it's one of those trails that feels like it kind of follows a fissure in the rock where water likes to seep out. I doubt this trail ever really dries out much. This is a lot like the Northwest Timber Trail, only less disappointing since it doesn't appear at the end of your ride. When you get to this mud pit, turn right to stay on the Lost Lake Trail. The trail to the left goes to the East Lost Lake Trail, which travels along the other side of Lost Lake. When you get up here, the trail finally parallels Lost Lake, which you probably can't see on this GoPro video because, well, it's a GoPro, but there's a pretty nifty looking lake down there. So we found it. It's not lost anymore. This section of the Lost Lake Trail kind of follows this bench for about 2.5 miles through more muddy tracks, but at least the lake is visible for a good share of it, so, there's that. This intersection is dumb. To the left is some boring connector road I'm not interested in, so we turned right. Where the first views out to the Puget Sound kind of present themselves, they're filtered views through trees, and gray water against gray clouds definitely does not show up on a GoPro, but I assure you there are views here. If it was a clear day, you would have seen blue water through these trees. This portion of the trail loses about 550 feet over 1.3 miles. Aside from one little climb in it, this is a very green, very wide, and fast downhill jaunt. Shortly before the next intersection, the South Lost Lake Trail intersects with Double Down, the black line that most people come here to shuttle that I'm sure most people were hoping would be included in this review, but it's not. Maybe another time. Rumor has it, it's gotten a little bit flowier as it's become more popular, and I did not come to Bellingham looking for flow. Turn right at this intersection with Fragrance Lake Road and put your climbing pants on because this next section of the ride gains 800 feet over 1.8 miles. I forgot to film the intersection with Cleator Road, but this is Cleator Road. After climbing a ways up Cleator Road, you'll see this trail off to the left. Don't go down this trail yet. We'll come back to it, but first, we have to ride up to the Cyrus Gates Overlook because it would be a sin to do this much climbing and not look out over the Puget Sound at like the most famous viewpoint here. So you can see southern Vancouver from here on a clear day. There are oil tankers out in the Sound, the Alcoa aluminum plant visible, and here in these pandemic times while I was filming this was the closest any of us were going to get to Canada. Sad. Okay, back to that trailhead we just left behind. So this is the start of the Ridge Trail, which is the trail we came here for. This is the main attraction. Longtime viewers of this channel may remember me talking about the Lewis River Trail and how it's uphill both ways. Well, even though the trail is technically, even though the Ridge Trail is technically the descent, it's a very technical descent. We are very close to Canada after all, and the closer you get to Canada, the gnarlier the tech becomes. This is techy technical. Like any ridge trail, this doesn't really behave itself for your benefit, and that's what I really ended up liking the most about this trail. It's techiness. This is sort of in that transitional zone between super rocky Canadian tech and the loamier tech of the central Washington Cascades. There are lots of roots and rocks, just like you'll find up at Whistler, with the principal difference that most of the roots are rooted in actual dirt instead of just sort of fanning out across the surface of the granite as is frequently found farther north of here. There are a lot of very steep roll downs with obstacles in them, obstacles that become kickers if this trail is being ridden with proper enthusiasm. But then as soon as a feature is ridden, just as soon as you really get into the downhill, the trail starts climbing up the hill again. It's going to be like this the whole way down. Like, of all the trails I rode with Jeff this day, this is the one I want to come back and session the most, because I know that if I could just do it again and again and again, I could get some of these features right eventually. That, to me, is the hallmark of a great trail. Not flow, not speed, but that it's the kind of challenge that makes me want to return to conquer it once again. This was definitely just a little out of my comfort zone, and that's just perfect. Oh yeah, and I'd be lying if I said there weren't a lot of sections where even experienced bikers will need to walk the bike. Remember, this is mountain biking. If you never have to get off the bike, then you're not really mountain biking, are you? If you haven't been practicing on your flat pedals for a while, you'll feel it on this trail. Riding this trail is like a full body exercise in dexterity. At least it is when you can actually ride the bike and not just push it. And then the trail arrives at this one really insane climb. And by climb, I mean that you'd have to session this for a decade before you could ever ascend it without getting off the bike. Like, maybe if you made it your life's work to climb this on a bike, eventually you'd crack this code. You'll be carrying the bike on your shoulders in a couple of spots. I'm not going to defend this, it sucks. There is a ride around that bypasses all of this, but that wouldn't be any fun now, would it? A lot of these roll downs are kind of techy, where they're the kind of techie where if you let yourself think about it too much, you won't be able to ride it. So ride in control and don't think about it too much. After shouldering your bike up that last climb, there is a lot more actual rolling on the backside of this. I could go on ad nauseum about this trail, but you'll eventually get bored and wonder if that's all I'm going to talk about in this review. Suffice it to say that this trail is rocky, rooty, and technical, and if you subject your beginner friends to this trail, you deserve whatever relationship calamity is about to befall you. This isn't a beginner or intermediate trail, and I strongly suggest you bypass it if you're not certain everyone in your group is up for a little frustration. That disclaimer aside, if you're into tech, you absolutely have to ride this trail. It's not to be missed. You can thank me later. If you followed the ride route that I posted in the description to this video, then eventually the trail will take you out to this viewpoint on the other side of the narrow valley that you've actually been riding around. I don't know if you can actually see the other viewpoint, the Raptor Ridge viewpoint from the side we're on here, but it's still cool to get a sense of the geography you're traversing on your bike. What can I say? Who doesn't like ridges and viewpoints? I know I like ridges with exposures and viewpoints. On this rim of the valley, there are a lot more of these exposed granite rocks and outcroppings. I love the rock around here, and it looks like on a dry day it would be pretty grippy and trustworthy. There's just something so gnarly about the landscape up here that makes it such a joy to play around in. I love descents like this with roots and rocks and slabs all over them, and all the pain of the approach is totally worth it just to get to ride this part of the ridge trail. It's a real magical playground in here. Keep your front end light, I suppose. And also the day we rode this was weirdly slippery. Like, more slippery than you would think it would be even for a wet day. It was just a strange kind of slick. That's just another potential complication to be aware of anywhere in the Pacific Northwest. I'm not sure how you should really alter your behavior in response to it. Just be aware that this is the Pacific Northwest, and it rides like the Pacific Northwest, by which, of course, I mean it's a primordial fairyland of rainbows, unicorns, and magic. And misty days. I think our conversation about how technical this trail is says it all.
Oh my gosh, there's so many places back there where I was like, okay, I'm going too fast, but I don't have a front brake.
Because it's so slippery?
Yeah, so I'm just like, my back tire is locked up and I'm just sliding down it and I can't touch the front because then I won't be able to steer.
Touch the front too hard, you'll just lose it,
yeah.
And you're looking for a dentist, basically.
Yeah.
It's a little dicey.
Yeah.
Nothing's like hairball.
No.
But it's a little dicey.
Right.
My favorite trail in Bellingham and really in Washington, just that ridge trail.
That was fun.
Cool.
That was cool. It's
a challenge, right?
Yeah. Well,
you got to go into it expecting it to be challenging. So I'm glad it's rated black diamond on the map. It's not black because it's so steep and gnarly. It's black because it's legitimately technical, and it's hard to find a technical trail.
The last significant trail we rode before dropping back down to the parking lot on stroller paths was Hush Hush, and I loved that trail so much. I wish I was riding it right now instead of just sitting here writing a review about it. Hush Hush is like if a flow trail had a baby with the Ridge Trail. It's so perfect, just kind of in that middle zone. That said, this trail had a few features on it that just flat out confused me. And that was so awesome. Like, how often do you come up to a feature and you're not so much intimidated by it, is just confused. Like, how do I ride this? I didn't know what to do. The trail just has possibility everywhere, from rider left to rider right. There are just so many different ways that everything can be approached and ridden. Also, like any good trail, oftentimes the sissy line isn't the easier line. Just people trying to ride around features find out that there's no easier pathway than just to go through it. This trail undulates, and it has tight and technical switchbacks everywhere. This is the kind of trail that all the racers complain about when it's included in the itinerary. While it is, for the most part, a downhill trail, any attempts to just go fast without some coordination and finesse are met with immediate frustration. It just weaves in and out and over and under. You can see what the trail builders were thinking in here, and they were thinking. They wanted something challenging. A real reason to keep coming back and sessioning the same features. That said, unfortunately, it appears folks have been sneaking up here to try and sanitize this trail. I don't understand that behavior. Why would you go to the trouble of hauling a saw up here and cutting out roots of living trees just to make the ride easier for you? Like, just go ride on the stroller path if you can't handle it. Jeez. Plenty of trodes out there. Anyhow, this trail left a big old grin on my face because I liked it. If you're into techie trails with lots of fun surprises that you can use to make yourself a better biker, then you'll like it too. The rest of this ride is just a coast down the stroller paths back to the parking area. My goodness, I liked Chuckanut. I think I'll come back here. If you were planning a trip to Bellingham and found this video helpful, or maybe you just thought it was entertaining, or you find my other videos entertaining, I could really use your support to keep this going. You can support me by becoming a subscriber. You can provide even more support if you become a patron by going to patreon.com/voiceovertrails. Patrons not only get their names mentioned at the end of these videos, but Low Me Goodness level sponsors even get early access. On top of being able to sleep with the comforting knowledge that you have supported me in this mission, you'll also have my eternal gratitude. You can find the link to my Patreon page in the description to this video right next to the link to the GPS coordinates to this ride. Now, get out there and go ride your bike.